Hello, and welcome to another one of your interviews on the Hormone Balance After 40 Summit. I am your host, Bridget Danner. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to our summit sponsors and our daily sponsors. And a reminder to you that you can own this summit, all the recordings and notes and a pile of bonuses. So check that out on this page. Check out that link and enjoy this interview. Tana Amen, welcome to the summit.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here talking about a subject very personal. So this is good.
Yeah, I want to hear some of your personal story if you don't mind sharing. And, people may have heard of you, but this is the first time I've interviewed you, so I'm excited to get to know you a little bit better. But yeah, share for our listeners and viewers, how did you come to be doing what you do, and what are you doing?
So just to give you a little background, we have the Amon clinics. So my husband, Dr. Daniel Amon, and I, we have the Amon clinics, and we currently have 6 clinics. We are psychiatric clinics, but we look at brain scans and how your brain affects behavior. So what's going on inside your head, not just, sit down and tell us your problems, but we want to know everything. We test hormones, we test for infections, we test for everything in your life to know what's happening in your life so that we can really dial in what's going on with you and your behavior and how it's affecting your life. With a better brain comes a better life. So if someone's hormones are off, what people don't realize, we do this full hormone panel, and a lot of times people are like, but I'm depressed or I'm having marital problems. Well, guess what? Your hormones are heavily related to a lot of things going on in your life. And a lot of people don't really understand that some of those fixes are not that hard. And I came to be involved in this, doing what I'm doing now in a very personal way, because I really focus on the lifestyle aspect of what we do here at the clinics. And that comes from my own struggles. I was by training, neurosurgical ICU nurse. And I worked mostly in surgery, very Western medicine. But I was also very sick as a kid. And I was in my early 20s diagnosed with thyroid cancer that had metastasized and recurred multiple times. And I also had thyroid imbalances and other hormonal imbalances, like significant. So I had polycystic ovarian syndrome. And a lot of that came from the way I grew up, and we didn't know a lot of this stuff. So I was very poor, ate very poorly. So a lot of the foods, which are causing a lot of problems now, a lot of exposure to things, which we now know environmental exposure causes a lot of these problems with hormones. They're hormone disruptors. And I didn't know that. All I knew is I was having major problems in my life. So going on this journey to figure out how to fix it, because I'm a fixer, I want to know what's going on, what can I do for it, is how I came to write 8 books. The most current one was one I wrote with my husband, The Brain Warrior's Way and The Brain Warrior's Way Cookbook. Those are 2 books we wrote together. And just having a blast, really trying to help people understand that you're not stuck with the brain you have, and your hormones do play a really big part. So it's a way to say that's why I'm here.
Perfect. Well, I know a lot of women in midlife feel like they're being run by their hormones, or like they have no control over their moods, like something is shifting and they don't have control. So I wonder if you can just start us out, like, how does this menopausal change affect the brain?
It's really interesting. So when you see it from our perspective, we actually do brain scans. We've done brain scans on, this is really interesting, and I can give you some of these brain scans to insert if you want.
Wow, great.
Brain scans on people with PMDD, which is a really severe form of PMS, or also going through menopause. And those hormonal shifts actually change brain function. And there's more than that just going on in the brain. There's actually this shift in how your brain is being rewired. It's actually being rewired. So your brain goes through 3 phases of rewiring. It rewires when you are a teenager. So it wires when you're a kid, when you're a baby, and it goes through that wiring phase. Then it rewires and prunes when you're a teenager. Then for women, when they become mommies. So when you get pregnant and you become a mom, your brain rewires, and it's called mommy brain. It becomes estrogenized. Okay, so your brain becomes estrogenized. Some of us say we get pregnancy dementia, like it affects how you think, sometimes not always in a great way, but it does tend to make us more nesty. We want to nest. We want to protect our nest. That mama bear comes out of us, and we'll do anything to protect that nest. including putting up with things we wouldn't normally put up with. Okay. Some things we put up with if it's a threat to our family. Some things that threaten to break our family apart, we will put up with. So we let a lot of things go that would normally bother us during this estrogenized phase. So really interesting studies have been done, and a big survey done by AARP showed that it's not men. Everyone thought it was men going through midlife crisis that were filing for divorce, like in their 40s and 50s. It's not. It's women. It's mostly women who file. Now, men have their own issues with their hormones, but it's mostly men who are filing. And what this turned out to be, this is really interesting. What some of the studies are showing is that women's brain rewire again going through menopause, and they de-estrogenize, and then testosterone becomes dominant. And so what ends up happening is all those things that you put up with for all those years that were kind of annoying, but you were willing to let them go, you're suddenly not as willing to let go. And you now become more self-focused. Your kids are out of the nest, and now it's like, no, I'm going to take care of me. And you become less tolerant. And that you have that de-estrogenizing phase. And so it's really interesting, and you suddenly aren't going to put up with it. So now I'm really simplifying it. I'm just trying to give you these phases kind of happens. And I'm really oversimplifying. We haven't talked about menopause and what can go on and what can really affect women negatively, because PMS and menopause are very real things. And for some women, they're much bigger than they are for other women.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a normal process of de-estronizing. Sorry to say the brain. Testosterone becomes, you said, the more dominant, which I'd be curious to hear more about that. So if that's a natural process, why does that often feel so hard?
So yeah, I've heard women describe it like it's like this war with my body. Like that's how women describe it. And believe me, this is becoming personal for me. I'm 48 years old. So it's like, oh, okay, I'm starting to get it. I'm not full blown in menopause yet, but I'm sort of in that perimenopausal phase of like, things are not the same. I'm noticing, muscle tone starting to change and my energy changing, focus is changing. All of that stuff begins to change because your hormones are shifting in a very pretty radical way. And so as testosterone actually goes down as well. All of your hormones start to shift and go down, but one becomes more dominant. Testosterone does start to become more dominant as estrogen drops. But as all of them drop, people think that too much testosterone can be a really bad thing, and it can be a really bad thing. It can be really bad if it's too high. It can cause you to lack the ability to commit. It can, cause certain problems for women. It can cause issues with heart disease, diabetes, make you more prone to certain issues, make you less insulin sensitive, stuff like that if your testosterone's too high. However, if it's too low, then you're less motivated, more likely to be depressed. Your memory suffers. And a lot of other things begin to happen. Same thing with estrogen, same thing with progesterone. When they drop radically, a lot of things begin to happen. You begin to not sleep as well, and that affects everything. Just that lack of sleep begins to affect everything. I mean, I know just one day of not sleeping right, and I just can't focus right, and then I get grumpier. So, when you think about just the sleep aspect, or it also can affect the frontal lobes, and, it affects your memory. It affects how you focus, forethought, judgment. So you're more likely to say the things that maybe you would have had a break. Your frontal lobes are your brain's brake. They have the ability, that's your ability to use forethought and judgment, to put that brake on and not say everything you think. But if that begins to shift and all of a sudden you're like, I'm just going to say whatever I think. Well, you can see where that's not always very helpful, especially if you are married. So,
and that would be a low testosterone or just a falling level.
It's just the falling levels of your hormones. Like the estrogenation can, all of them dropping can cause this problem. Okay. So when they're out of balance, especially. So what we see is a lot of women are, they have this lack of balance. Some women, have it worse than others. The hot flashes begin to happen. That drives people crazy. And there are things you can do. So we always recommend you work with a hormone specialist, no question. I mean, I always say I would be on the evening news if I didn't have a hormone specialist I worked with. There's no question. I have polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so I tend to be more testosterone dominant, like seriously testosterone dominant, and I have low progesterone. And it's not conducive to being warm and fuzzy and bonded. So without that, being balanced, it really, you'll see that dominance, sort of come out. But I get them balanced. Now, not everybody wants to go have their hormones balanced. They don't want to do hormone therapy. So I would be working with someone to do some of the natural things you can do, like exercise, cutting out sugar. No kidding, you need to cut out sugar. That's one of the big things, processed foods. And then you need to really think about environmental toxins, things like plastics and BPA. They are endocrine disruptors. They are actually hormone disruptors. They affect your hormones in negative ways. So if you're not going to get your hormones balanced, be really aware of what's affecting your hormones and how you can at least improve them in a natural way.
Okay, yeah, we'll give some natural tips later. I can't help but wonder about the male brain when we talk about the female brain. Do they go through these different rewiring phases too?
They do. It's probably not as pronounced. And so for a long time, it was like, is this real? Is andropause real? Andropause, or that's sort of associated with midlife crisis for men. So yeah, their testosterone drops. And for some men, that can be really scary. So they start to feel like, their libido maybe isn't quite the same. Their muscle tone's not quite the same. Maybe they don't have that sort of like very masculine feel. And at the same time, maybe their wives are going through menopause and they don't really want anything to do with them. So lots going on in their own heads. And so andropause is complicated as well. So if that testosterone is dropping, they're experiencing their own issues. And again, there are some natural things they can do, like cutting out sugar, starting to exercise. That naturally boosts testosterone. And that's actually good for women as well. So interestingly enough, when women cut out sugar and they exercise, it actually helps to decrease the testosterone, the elevated testosterone associated with polycystic ovarian syndrome. But it increases testosterone that men need, the natural way that men need testosterone. So I find that fascinating how it's this balancing effect, right? So
Yeah.
same prescription for two different issues, and it ends up working out really well for both. So really, it's a lifestyle change that benefits both males and females.
So that's something you could do together. So it sounds like there's this tendency, women are starting to find themselves. You said they're more often initiating divorces. What can we do what else can we do to kind of understand each other at this time of life? How are relationships changing?
Right. So now we understand why it sort of happens.
Okay.
Maybe some of you want to be divorced. I don't know about
True.
you. I don't. I actually really like my husband, but I don't want to end up divorced and look back and go, oh my gosh, what did I do? I blew everything up because I was going through menopause. Wow. I mean, I don't want to do that, right? Most of us don't really want to do that. We might end up doing that because things get a little out of control and we didn't really understand what to do. But there's a lot you can do. I mean, number one, get your hormones checked. Number two, know some of these lifestyle things that you can do. There's way more that you can do than you realize. Helping your sleep, helping your diet, helping with your exercise. But also some of the cognitive things, like one of the things we teach is killing the ants or automatic negative thoughts, because they'll be more likely to happen during those phases. You're not sleeping, you're having these issues, you might have more automatic negative thoughts. So if you end up with these automatic negative thoughts, like one of the things that I love, so we have ways of killing the ants, and one of my favorite ways of killing them is 4 simple questions. Byron Katie has 4 simple questions. Is it true? Is it absolutely true? Can I know that it's true? My husband's a jerk. Can I know that that's true? Is he always a jerk? Do I know that he's always a jerk? Well, probably not. He's probably not always a jerk. I can think of times he probably wasn't. So I break that thought. The second then question that I would ask is, how do I feel when I have that thought? Irritated. I don't want to listen to him. I pull away from him. I ignore him. I isolate, or I yell at him, right? So those are things that I engage in. Who would I be if I could never have the thought my husband was a jerk? I'd be nicer. I'd be more open. I would talk to him more. I'd be more engaged. I would listen, which is probably one of his complaints, right? I would listen more. And then the really powerful part of it is turning the thought around to its opposite. My husband is a jerk. I'm a jerk. Oh, ouch. Okay, so I do this one a lot, and whenever I have that thought, someone's a jerk, I'm a jerk. Yeah, you know what? That actually is true sometimes. I actually am a jerk sometimes. If I'm really honest with myself, if you're really honest with yourself, I bet you can think of times you've been a jerk and wish you hadn't been, right? So, and I will actually find 3 examples of when I've been a jerk to my husband. So then that literally will break that pattern right there. Then another turnaround. So that's to myself. The turnaround to yourself is I am a jerk. Then the next one is he's not a jerk. And that's a really, because I can think of lots of examples. I'd ask you to come up with three examples of when he has not been a jerk. And I bet you can come up with a whole lot more than that. Now, it doesn't mean everything's going to be perfect when you're done with this. What it does is it breaks that negative thought. It sort of kills that automatic negative thought. So you're more open to listening. So you're more aware. So that's one of the big things we give you for cognitive, your cognitive functioning and ability to just sort of stop and listen to each other.
Yeah, I know for me and probably for a lot of women, like when I'm in the throes of an emotion, I almost can give myself permission to like do anything I want, say anything I want. And then you do sometimes regret it, because.
So let me ask you a question, because that's a really good point. Do you have children?
One. Mm-hmm.
Okay. When your child was young and threw temper tantrums, did you allow them to? When they felt entitled, did you allow them to get away with it?
You mean like if they were
temper tantrums,
inappropriate,
bratty, did you allow them to get away with it? Would you think that that's a good way for them to grow up?
No.
Being entitled and bratty, right? No, probably not.
Yeah.
So you discipline them, you teach them how to manage it, you teach them how to have self-discipline and control over their emotions and thoughts, right?
Yeah.
But yet, don't really learn. I don't know why we don't learn the skill of teaching our inner child who's throwing these temper tantrums and feels entitled and giving permission to ourselves to sort of run amok, like you just said. We all do it. But why did we never learn? Like, that's probably not beneficial. When I learned this skill, I went, wow, okay, I should have learned this in like 5th grade. But I didn't, or 2nd grade. So that's one of the things that we find to be super helpful is when people can take responsibility for their own behavior and their own thoughts. And I don't think of responsibility as blame. I think of it as the ability to respond.
Yeah, I think that communication with ourselves and our partner is so key. I mentioned before we started that my husband and I recently finished marriage counseling, and we actually got like a worksheet that was your husband wrote. I thought it was so funny. It was great. And we focused mostly on communication, right? So he's still him, I'm still me, but the way we come together is improved. It's not perfect. It's hard to totally learn new habits. It takes practice, but yeah. So I think that can be, a great midlife life lesson. Like you said, there's some things you put up with, or maybe you go into automatic pilot when you have little kids. You're too busy to fix everything. But when you get older, it's like, hey, maybe it's not him, maybe it's not you, maybe it's just fixing the way you come together.
Absolutely.
So great.
And we have mostly the thing we have control over is us, right? And we really don't have control over much else. So maybe the thing you can work on is how you respond. I mean, I just figured out, I'm divorced, and Daniel, this is not my first marriage. I don't want to make the same mistakes this time around. So I spent a lot of time figuring out what I could take responsibility for. What can I do differently? Because that's all you have. That's all you can do at the end of the day.
It's
and
true.
when you're going through this hormonal shift, you're more likely to say the things and give that inner child permission to sort of run amok.
Well, let's talk about another like kind of example of lack of self-control. Like when we want a food, right? We want a food and we say, well, I should have this. You're right.
Yep.
Tell us how we can work with that thought.
Well, first of all, understanding why it's happening. There's actually a brain-based reason for some of it, especially going through, PMS and menopause both. Okay. So when your hormones shift, it also affects your brain. So not just your hormones are shifting. It affects your blood sugar, your hormone shift, your PMS. Your blood sugar does change, but so does your brain. So as your frontal lobes drop, your frontal lobes tend to drop during PMS and menopause, and you've got these shifts in hormones that are affecting your brain. It does actually tend to make you more edgy. So for women, what we see is a drop in frontal lobes, that ability to put the brake on, your forethought, judgment, and your brake. But we also see an increase in the emotional brain. So the part that makes you upset and anxious and angry and all of that stuff, that really just the anxiety center in your brain. But it's also not just that, it's the gear shifter, the part of the brain that allows you to shift and let go. Let things go when you're irritated. That lights up. So that's what we've seen, especially in more severe cases. It's really hot. That part's really hot. And then the judgment is down. So you do tend to naturally crave things that will help you. And the one thing that does help settle down that emotional brain and make you feel better is serotonin. And one of the foods that helps to boost serotonin is sugar. Unfortunately, it's a temporary fix with a long-term consequence, right? So simple carbohydrates have this long-term consequence. There are other natural ways to do that with some more complex carbs or sweet potatoes or apples or things like that that have some health benefits and aren't going to give you diabetes and obesity, right, which will cause a whole nother host of problems. But you want to be able to, and actually, believe it or not, dark chocolate, cacao, things like that will help with that, those cravings, and they'll help settle down that emotional, that like edgy feeling. But that's one of the reasons women begin to crave more things like wine during menopause. It's like, I need a drink. I just need a drink. That's one of the reasons. So that's the issues. Now, sometimes people lack focus, and that's one of the things to focus on during those times. Actually, don't have those carbohydrates. You want protein. Protein helps to increase dopamine, which helps you focus. And if you're having an issue with both, okay, I'm anxious and I can't focus, that's when you want that combination meal. So maybe you want a sweet potato with some, high quality protein. Even if you're a vegan, just focus on high quality plant-based protein, but it can help to settle down that emotional center and boost your focus. So
I love it.
Food matters, but cut out sugar, cut out those simple carbohydrates, focus on high quality nutrition during this time, for sure.
So I'm curious, when you say the serotonin is boosted temporarily by sugar, is there like a crash of serotonin as well?
So what happens is your blood sugar drops. So yeah, you're only going to get that temporary boost. It's only a temporary boost that you feel better, right? But what happens is your blood sugar drops. It crashes when that happens. So what ends up happening is when your blood sugar drops, so does your insulin. And when your insulin drops, okay, so your insulin spikes to bring that blood sugar down, blood sugar drops, insulin drops. What ends up happening is now you get anxious and irritable and you start craving more carbs. So now you've got a blood sugar reaction on top of it, and that's not healthy. It's really not healthy. And that's what keeps your cravings going. So yes, it's a temporary fix with the serotonin, but it also causes this long-term problem, not just with weight, not just with inflammation, which is going to make, by the way, going to actually magnify those symptoms. If you're inflamed, it's going to magnify the other symptoms you're experiencing. And it's also going to now cause cravings because of that cycle.
I want to share something I noticed recently. Like, I don't eat much sugar, but this weekend I had like a big dose and I felt horrible. So I thought, sugar really is strong. Like, I'm going to completely cut it out. And I'm not much, a little trail mix, or if I go to the coffee shop, maybe I get a chai. Not much, but I can't believe, like, just in the short time I've taken it out completely, no cheating, I feel so much more steady energy.
Yeah.
And that's another big complaint, right?
And it tends to take about 3 days. If you go on a sugar binge, it takes about 3 days to clear yourself of it and not start craving. You'll crave it for about 3 days. You've got to cut it out clean for about 3 days. You're going to have those cravings for a while. And then it's going to start to balance out and you'll lose the cravings, but only if you cut out the sugar. So the problem is most people are craving, so then they start eating more and more fruit. They start doing things to sort of lie to themselves that they're not really eating sugar. If you eat too much fruit, you're still getting a lot of sugar. So a little bit of fruit's good. Too much fruit is not. We weren't designed to eat 6 pieces of fruit a day all year long. That's not how nature intended it.
We're not monkeys. Yeah, it's funny. That's exactly what happened. Like, the first few days, I'm like, oh, this is like a little harder than I thought. Maybe I do have a little problem. And then it evened out.
Right, you almost feel a little blue or a little edgy or down, or like you're sort of like just jonesing for some. So, and that will magnify those symptoms of PMS and menopause.
Yeah, I think almost the cravings get magnified in the beginning when we're taking something out, because we're so used to getting that little fix when we we want it. So yeah, it's super interesting. I'm going to totally jump topics here, because you wanted to talk about seasonal affective disorder and how that affects menopause, which sounds interesting.
So you're talking about SAD. So what I would like to touch on with that is vitamin D. So vitamin D is really important too, because some people don't have a choice, the seasonal affective disorder and vitamin D. If you live in a climate that is really sort of dark and dreary. I've got family that lives in Oregon, and this year was just really hard for them. It was a really tough winter.
That's where I live.
Yeah, really had a hard time seeing the sun this year. I had a hard time going to visit because of the ice storms. Like, what are ice storms? What? I live in California. Like, what are ice storms? So it was really tough. I noticed one of my sisters went through really tough depression. And so we kept her vitamin D pumped. I mean, we pumped up that vitamin D on her, but that's going to really magnify those symptoms of PMS and menopause. If your vitamin D is low and you're already struggling, that's going to bring out that depression. And that's definitely going to affect your symptoms that you're already struggling with. So one of the things you can do is keep your vitamin D optimized. 49 out of 50 people that we tested at Amon clinics were low in vitamin D.
Wow.
49 out of, they weren't just a little low, they were critically low. Like we had patients as low as 6. Okay, we tend to keep people at high normal, so we want them between 50 and 90. Okay, and we had patients at 6 or 19 or 11. That's terrible, and it's associated with almost nearly every major illness. So it's one of the simple things you can do.
Yeah, I see that low a lot too with autoimmunity, but other times too, for sure. So that's a great tip. You've given us a lot of fun tips. You want to keep rolling with some more tips to survive menopause?
Sure. So one of the things I've been giving you some things with cutting out sugar, but one thing you can actually add, this is one you can add for men and women. Women, you can sneak this into the smoothie with your men. So maca root powder. Maca root powder actually has studies showing its effectiveness in helping with sexual function, both men and women. So, and it actually helps to just sort of, modulate those symptoms that women experience during menopause. So I'd actually recommend putting it in a smoothie and, have some fun with that. So I thought that was really interesting that there were actual studies showing that. Let's see. I wanted to give you a couple more. So cortisol is going to actually make everything worse. So cortisol is your stress hormone. Stress kills your sexual function, right? We don't want to kill your sexual function during menopause any more than you're already struggling with it. So if you're experiencing stress, meditation and cut sugar. I already said cut sugar, so I'm going to really focus on exercise and meditating. If you just take 5 minutes in the morning to refocus your brain, ground, say a prayer, and focus on being grateful, find something about your spouse that you're grateful for, and just focus on that. It will help to settle the cortisol in your system. And that cortisol kills sexual function, like big time. So we want to really modulate that.
That's great. That's great. Before we get into your resources, I'd like to learn more about the brain scans. Like, what are they measuring? How do they work? Like, how do we get one?
So what we do is the SPECT scan. All right. So SPECT scan is a little different than, say, an MRI or a CT scan. So MRI and CT scans, people will often say, well, I've already had an MRI or I've already had a CT scan. They're not the same thing. We're comparing apples and oranges. Okay. So an MRI and a CT scan measure, they actually show anatomy. It'd be like my computer here. Okay. They show, is the computer in one piece? Does it look normal? Does it appear to be normal? It appears to be normal. But if I drop it, okay, if I drop the computer, and then I try to turn it on, it might not turn on. It might not run right. Okay. Or if I get a virus in it, it might not run the same way, but it might look perfectly fine. Right. So what the SPECT scan shows is it shows the activity. So it's not that the anatomy, it's while it's functioning. What does the blood flow look like? What is it doing when you're concentrating? What areas of the brain are struggling that don't have enough blood flow, that don't have enough electrical, like, you know what I'm saying? Like that, it doesn't have enough activity. So that's what we're looking at, is activity and blood flow. That's why they're different. So when someone is struggling with severe PMS, that PMDD, or very similar with menopause, we'll see that drop in the front part of their brain, and we'll see that emotional center light up. So they're getting more activity in one part of the brain and it drops in another part of the brain. Mm-hmm. And that gives us a map for like, okay, so you're telling me that you have, menopause. We looked at your hormones show you're in menopause, and you've got these symptoms. Now we have a map. You can't change what you don't measure. So what we're going to try and do is normalize all of that, those numbers as much as we can.
Oh, and really interesting. So beyond hormones, what other kind of things do you see? What kind of conditions do you see in your clinic?
in our clinics, oh dear Lord. So we see a lot of ADD. So we
Okay.
child psychiatrists. So we see a lot of ADD, ADHD, bipolar disorder, autism. Believe it or not, we're starting to see, so people come in with psychosis, but see, psychosis is just, we're sort of a symptom. We want to know what's causing it. And we're finding a lot of things like Lyme disease or other types of infection. And so we always check for all of that. If we can't find something, you know, we'll do our regular checkup. And if we don't find it, we'll keep looking. We also see people suffering with certain, mental function if their thyroid's off, if their testosterone is off, if their vitamin D is off. All of those things will affect how your brain functions. But we see schizophrenia. I mean, we see a lot of different things. We've got a lot of doctors that work for us, addictions. So, and, you know, like I said, we go through the whole algorithm of checking everything, doing a full assessment. You're here for 3 days when you come into one of our clinics.
Oh, okay.
Full assessment. And then we're going to do the scan, and we're going to talk to you, and we're going to talk to your family, and we're going to figure out how to get you to where we need to get you to. How do we optimize?
Yeah, I wanted to ask because I know we've got, you know, moms and grandmas and aunties on the summit. And,
Alzheimer's is you just said grandmas. That's the huge area that's been just
okay.
Skyrocketing lately.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's good to know since you have a different approach, like all the spectrum of things that we could potentially visit you for, so to speak. So you've written, what did you say, 8 books?
I've written 8 books. And yeah, the first ones were written with my husband. It's my favorite, Brain Warriors Way and the Brain Warriors Way cookbook. So all the things I'm telling you sound hard: cut out sugar, eat more vegetables, but that's why I do the cookbooks. So it's 130 recipes, and people think it's hard. There's no suffering. There's blueberry muffins, right? There's pancakes, there's brownies, there's all these things. It's how you make them. You can do that and make them in a way that are going to nourish you, and you can have fun and do this and have fun with your family. Or you can get sick and have, obesity and diabetes and heart disease and suffer with menopause. So I want to show you how to do that and actually enjoy your life.
Okay, great. And you've got a gift that's a little bit related, the Brain Warriors Way Sustenance Guide. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a quick start guide. So it will show you, it's a shopping list to get you started. It's 5 recipes, and it's tips on what you do right now, today, to get started. So it's not hard. It is a mindset. So we want you to change your mindset. Having cancer is hard. Going through a divorce is hard. All of those things are hard, right? Raising children can be hard. But doing this is a mindset. It's just you make the decision, and then you have a guide and someone to teach you. We say we have a tribe, and you've got mentors that help you along the way to make these changes and make it not so hard.
Yeah, I love the quick start because, people can get overwhelmed. So I just learn a few recipes, get some tips. If you integrate that, then go to the next level. You have some courses too, right?
We do. We have lots of courses. So my husband and I actually taught a 6-month course where we actually had 20,000 people sign up for it.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. And we gave black belts in health. And you can still sign up for that course. We have that available. It's called the Brain Warriors Way. And so we have what we call Amon University. And the Brain Warriors Way is 6 months of us literally, because we don't see people individually any longer. We just can't. But that's our way that we actually decided we were going to hold your hand for 6 months. We're going to walk you through this process. And it's the same program we put people through at our clinics. So minus the scan, it's the same program we put people through at the clinics. This is what we would tell you. This is how we would walk you through it. So that's why I think it's so special. It's the first time we've done that. And we give gifts and black belts as people progress.
That's really cute. That makes it fun, right? So we're going to share your links, but just, but so people can hear them. Where are the best places to find you and your husband?
Perfect. Thank you. So you can go to amonclinics.com to get information on the courses and the clinics. And if you are interested in the book or the quick start guide, you can go to tanaamen.com. And we will provide that for you. Perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Tana. And for our listeners and viewers, if you want the notes on everything that was said here, we put them all into a really easy PDF from this and all the lectures. So if you decide you want to buy the summit, you'll have all that, and you'll have some nice bonuses. And I think you guys gave us an extra bonus too. I can't remember what it was, but we've got like some detox guides in the bonuses, which you talked about. Really important to keep those toxins out for our hormone health. So yeah, thanks again, and thanks to all our listeners and viewers.